A lady named Cara Brookins built software systems for almost 20 years very successfully as a senior analyst. But when her life began to fall apart as a result of a series of unmanageable events in her personal life, she rebuilt her life quite unconventionally. She found herself alone and with 4 children and needing a place to live. So they decided they were going to build their own home with limited resources, a 3,500 square foot house from the ground up with no other resource than YouTube videos. Her story of success went viral in 75 countries. It was optioned for a film in Hollywood, and that story has been viewed more than 2 billion with a B times in the last number of years. Cara is the host of the Cara Brookins Show and the author of 8 books, including Rise, How a House Helped Build a Family. You may have seen her on shows like The Today Show, Inside Edition, Tamron Hall, or you may have read about her in the New York Times, perhaps Good Housekeeping magazine, and Southern Living. But here to prove that you can succeed given your starting spot and achieve your grandest goals, no matter how bleak it might seem, rise and be a part of new beginnings at all times. We're here to welcome to the stage with us our featured guest, Cara Brookins. Cara, come and be with us.
Thank you. Oh, thank you for that fantastic introduction, and thank all of you for sticking around, showing up here today. Feels pretty great to be out of the house full time again, doesn't it? Gosh, those pandemic years. Eek, that was too much extra time at the house. What'd you do with all your extra time? Watch any how-to videos? How to cook your own food, grow a quarantine beard. Anyone else cut your own hair? Ladies, our bangs are finally looking nice again. Geez, there's a how-to video for everything, isn't there? What I've learned, though, is you have to be really careful which ones you watch. These videos can get you to do some crazy stuff. Exhibit A, right here. It doesn't even matter if you start watching these on YouTube or TikTok. They all end the same way, don't they? With you in the middle of your living room floor holding a motorcycle carburetor and 5 pounds of edible glitter. We've all been there. Where I live in the South, this is when the neighbors gather out at the mailbox to say, "Bless your heart." Of course, I know you're thinking, on the day I stepped into an empty field and started building myself a house, I needed someone to bless my heart. Stage an intervention, that idea was crazy. Let me tell you, though, about the day that idea started. It was a cold fall day, 2007. My only goal was actually to clean out my email. 2007, we didn't all have these smartphones, so I had to go to the big family computer we all shared in the den. My first email there brings up a brand new website. It's called YouTube. There are hundreds of videos there, and I just press play on one. This guy pops up. I know you're thinking it was a guy building a house, but no. My first how-to video was a guy in a faded red shirt holding a lemon bundt cake. Ordinary enough guy, just a little overly enthusiastic about his bundt cake. You know the kind of YouTuber I mean. He's all, "We're about to bake your new favorite cake right now. It's only 3 easy steps." I was skeptical until he looked me straight in the eye, took a bite of that cake. I swear I could taste lemon. My mouth is watering. 3 easy steps? I bet I could do that. I stood up, walked to my kitchen, and I started baking that cake. Now that was actually a big deal, because in 2007, I was in the middle of the worst time of my entire life. I was a single mom with 4 kids. I'd lost my life savings. I was about to lose my house. I was stuck. I wasn't getting up to do much of anything. I was frustrated and my life was not going in the direction I wanted. Now, we've all felt some level of stuck before. Maybe you've been stuck on a project at work, maybe at home, or maybe it's snowballed and all felt overwhelming at once. You've been there, you've felt this, so you know what happened when I got a slice of that warm lemon cake and went back to my email. Same thing happened again. Not another cake, but I watched another video and then another one, and then we already talked about how this ends. Living room floor, edible glitter. See, this how-to video cycle is very predictable. And that predictable cycle is exactly what launched my house project. It was press play. I bet I could do that. Weeks later, I end up in the middle of an empty field with 2x4s, pipes, nails, and bricks. Of course, I know, for you guys, I'm gonna have to explain how I let it get so extreme that I thought that kind of a hair day was worth it. Seriously, though, to tell you how I got here, we're gonna have to go back a little bit further, to about 10 years before I started building the house. Now, I know you thought building the house was gonna be the hard part today, but this is actually the hard part. We'll go through the backstory quickly, though. 10 years earlier, I was married to this guy named Adam. Super smart guy. He had a commercial pilot's license. Our first date, he flew me to a nearby town. We had French fries and Pepsi. But a couple months after Adam and I got married, he started acting a little bit strange. First, he's just staring out the window for 20 hours at a time. A couple of months later, I notice whenever he's walking through the house and talking, he'd go silent if he passed under a heat vent, because they're listening. Things got a little bit stranger until I started finding him in our dining room at 2 a.m., tapping Morse code messages on the wall. And then things got scary, until one day I woke up and all of our kitchen knives were lined up around me in the bed. And Adam was diagnosed with full-blown severe paranoid schizophrenia. He became really dangerous and we divorced. But for the next 10 years, Adam would keep coming back, tormenting me, tormenting my children. There were days they were too scared to get out of bed because he'd come by in the middle of the night and paint little symbols all over their bedroom windows, years after we divorced. Other days, we'd come home from work and school, and we would find our pets tortured. More than once, I had to hold Adam at gunpoint, wondering, is this the time I'm really gonna have to shoot him before the police can get here? And the police, their hands were tied. The best they could do is put him back in the state hospital 2 days, maybe 4. They'd let him out, and we would start all over again. Years of this fear. I'm gonna pause right there for just a second, because that part feels heavy. I know you guys want to leave today with some motivation, and I promise that's still on the schedule. But you know how sometimes you start to feel like this is the worst part of my entire life, or I've hit the hardest part of my entire career. Things can't get any worse than this. But then life just keeps throwing hard things your way, and you find out how much lower you can really go. That's what happened to me. After years of running and being afraid of Adam, I met this muscled-up firefighter. And he said, "Cara, I see what's happening with you, these kids, and Adam coming after you. I'd do anything to keep you safe." I believed him. But what that firefighter saw in me was the perfect target. And I started waking up with that firefighter's hands around my throat, squeezing hard enough to leave bruises, letting me know he could kill me anytime he wanted. And I couldn't just leave, because he was keeping Adam away. If I left, we'd be right back in Adam's sights again, out of the frying pan, into the fire. Now, imagine what that's like if your best and safest option is staying in a place where you know you'll be shaken awake by a muscled-up man. His face so close to mine, the vodka from his breath would make my eyes sting. Struggling to draw in one more breath of air, knowing I could die like that. And right there on the other side of my bedroom wall, these children were sleeping. It was 3 more years of that fear from 2 different directions before my kids and I were on our own again. Which brings us all the way back to 2007, but with a much clearer picture of the real mess my life was in on the night I watched that first how-to video. Now, by then, my kids were 17, 15, 11, and 2. The oldest, my daughter Hope, in the middle, then Drew, Jada, and little Roman. Now, thankfully, I had a great job. I was a senior software architect. But I was going into that job every day feeling like I was pretending I had it all together, like I'm just faking it. Because inside, I felt small and powerless still. Until everything changed on that night when I needed something that would pull me up and get me moving, and a how-to video pulled me up to bake a cake. And that changed everything. The very next morning, 5 a.m., I'm taking a shower. I'm just doing what we all do in the shower and thinking about cake. And I realized that cake video, really all these how-to videos had tapped into the secret to getting unstuck. The secret to getting unstuck is just getting started. And these videos weren't just showing me how to do things, they were pulling me up to start things. That was the pivotal moment when I realized if a small video could pull me up to do something small, I could use a bunch of them to do something big. I had found a shortcut, a hack to getting unstuck. And in that minute right there, I knew 2 things for sure. First, I was about to get unstuck. And second, it would be as easy as baking a cake. I was absolutely 100% wrong about that second one. None of this was easy. 20 minutes later, I'm driving the kids to school. My hair's still a little bit wet from that shower. And because I've always been one of those annoying overachiever moms, I was also cooking them a gourmet breakfast. You know, that blueberry Pop-Tart right there over the car heat vent? I live in Little Rock, Arkansas, so in the summer you can scramble some eggs up there on the dash, but fall is Pop-Tart season. You can follow me on TikTok for more gourmet tips. That morning, I serve breakfast to the back seat, and I look at my kids up in the mirror. And I see kids who are just as stuck and overwhelmed in survival mode as I was. And instead of doing what I'd been doing for months, you guys may have done this too, where you know something in your life needs to be fixed, so you declare really loudly in your own head, I know, I'm going to do better. That's it. I will do better at all the things, and then our life is gonna be better. Well, this morning, instead of doing that again, because it never works, I decided to model my next move after one of these how-to videos, which meant I was gonna have to start by holding up the finished cake. I was gonna have to set a clear, defined goal, one so clear I could taste it. Well, to find my goal, I just asked, hey, what do I need most? What's my biggest dream? That was easy. The kids and I needed a place to live. We needed a house. A goal is just a dream with a deadline, so I set one of those. 1 year from today, my kids and I will live safe in a house. That's when I had the big idea. I went home that night, back to that website, and I typed in cheap houses. Some realtor sites popped up. I couldn't afford much there. But then these other videos, how to frame a window, a wall, how to set a foundation block in 3 easy steps. I bet I could do that. So I thought, what if, instead of buying one of these broken down houses on the real estate sites, trying to fix it up before these kids all go off to college, what if I take all the money I can borrow from the bank, buy this big mountain of supplies, and we can put a house together ourselves? I swear I could see the whole project in my head, start to finish. It looked like this slightly larger than usual IKEA project. So I sat the kids down at the dining room table and I told them the idea. And I just asked them, hey, if you guys could build any kind of a house, what would you build? Never ask your children that. Hope asked for a replica of the Oval Office. Drew and Jada wanted this zip line, elaborate Harry Potter cupboard under the stairs. Little Roman, I mean, he's just 2, he can't want much. Roman asked for a poker table, mini fridge, and velvet paintings. He's 2, he's got a dream and a deadline. The kids just kept throwing out these crazy, crazy ideas, crazier than mine, and I set the bar pretty high. You know why we went ahead and started building a house anyhow? It was because of the looks in my kids' eyes. Just the idea of this house started to change my kids. Changed the way they stood, sat in the back seat of the car. It changed what they believed was possible. That's how powerful just setting a clear, defined goal can be. Because once your entire team can see it up here, so clear they can taste it, you can't unsee it. And your hunger for that goal becomes your motivation. Our motivation was having a safe life. For the first time I could remember, that felt possible. And of course, I was a little scared right then, maybe as scared as I'd ever been. I mean, wouldn't you be? If you just armed your small children with power saws and nail guns? And look at us. Do we look like the kind of family that knew how to build a house? No, spoiler alert, we were not. But the little bit of magic I had found behind these how-to videos, it went a lot deeper than this idea that I'd have to find a how-to video for anything I wanted to achieve in life. See, I was starting to learn the strategy, the psychology behind those how-to videos. I was learning how to use that little something the videos had that was pulling me up to get started. I was learning to use that to become a self-starter, to go from idea to action in a split second. It's one of the most important things I learned from these videos. Don't hesitate, don't procrastinate, move fast. So I did. Within weeks of having this idea, I bought an empty acre of land. Kids and I cleared it. We learned how to dig and pour a footer. I ordered 1,500 concrete blocks to start a block and fill foundation out there. We set all of those blocks using water we hauled in 5-gallon pails from my neighbor's pond in December and January. Mixed all that mortar in a wheelbarrow. And by this time, I did have a construction loan to buy all of these supplies. Even that hadn't been easy. It was a lot of banks, a little bit of fast talking, and even then the loan officer had stamped my application as a high risk. No idea why, it's a total mystery. But as a high risk, I would have 9 months to build an entire house. I'm working full-time, my kids are in school, and in 9 months, we have to put a house together, or we'll default on the loan, the bank will take the land, the house, everything. And every stage of this had to be signed off by a city inspector. That guy, this old traditional Southern man, behind schedule, overworked. First day I met him, he stood next to his truck, knuckles white on his clipboard, scowling at me. To be fair, I had just asked him 65 questions that could all be summarized as, how do you build a house anyhow? He looked me straight in the eye and said, are you sure you want to try this, sweetheart? I wanted to give him a nasty look for that, but he already had one. I said, look, I don't have a choice. I spent all the money I borrowed on this mountain of supplies. If I don't put it together into a house, we're going to be homeless. Inspector said, all right, I got one piece of advice for you. You're going to have to pull all of these kids together into some kind of a solid team out here. First thing you have to do is set that one right there down and tell him to keep his pants on. Truth hurts. You know, the way we did this, the way we jumped right in and did step 1 before we had any idea how to do step 7 or step 507. That isn't just some how-to video gimmick. It's actually, according to neuroscience, according to psychology, that is hands down the best way to get yourself unstuck. Get your hands on the tools. Start. Do one step. The secret to getting unstuck is getting started. And I learned that you don't have to know how to do the whole thing in order to move one step forward right now. I didn't have to know how to build an entire house in order to start building a house. And I know this will surprise you, it's pretty amazing, but my kids and I did absolutely everything right out there. After we tried it all the other ways. You're probably wondering too, like, are there any downsides to teaching your team to get this big idea and then charge right in to do it? I'm gonna let you decide. I'm gonna tell you a little story about a time my kids used the strategy really well against me. We're up on this concrete slab, block and fill foundation. We poured that slab, and it's finally time for us to start building the walls. So I'm up there with a 100-foot tape measure, and I'm measuring, and I know where my library wall and my laundry room wall are supposed to land. There's something suspicious. My numbers aren't adding up. Now, they're not off like 6 feet or anything, but there's 3 inches here, 2 inches there. It may not sound like a big deal, but I was the plumber out there. I'd pulled all my plumbing permits, and I had already set some of the water lines, sewer lines, and my gas lines in the concrete. So if all of a sudden that toilet was going to end up in my library or the dryer in the kitchen, it would be a big deal. Now, keep in mind, the kids and I had drawn the blueprints for this house ourselves. Big sheets of graph paper at the dining room table, pencils, rulers, erasers. These things have to be precise to the millimeter. I mean, in a room like this, you've all seen blueprints, so you might be able to spot this. I mean, don't feel bad if you can't. It may take an expert. I'm not one to brag, but my kids and I were really good at this. If you look really close, though, you may be able to spot just a couple subtle differences between a professional blueprint and the one my kids and I drew. That is the blueprint I took into the bank and got that mysterious high-risk rating, forever a mystery. And that is the blueprint we're using on top of that slab that day to actually mark the wall lines onto the concrete. Now, to do that, you guys probably have all seen these, but I want everyone to be able to really visualize how my kids pulled off their little con. I had a chalk line and that 100-foot tape measure. Chalk lines, just a little metal box, string coiled up in it, powdered chalk. We had this neon green one and a neon pink one. There's a winding handle on the outside. And the way we use this is Jada, the 11-year-old, would get the end of that chalk line, hold it down on that concrete where a wall was supposed to start, and then Hope would back up all the way to the other end of the wall, hold it down, pull it tight, reach out to the middle, lift up, and let it snap onto the floor. Where the chalk line was is where we'd build a wall. Now, the girls had volunteered enthusiastically to be the ones to mark that line. And they're having a blast out there. They're talking, laughing, joking around. They'd take turns winding up the string, high five. Let me just ask you, what do you think that means? Siblings, sisters out there getting along that well. They've teamed up against me, haven't they? I knew for sure something was wrong, but I'm on a time crunch. In fact, I'm on my hands and knees in front of a miter saw. I'm cutting 2x6s. I slide him over to Drew. He's got the nail gun. He's nailing together door headers, window headers, and then we start building whole walls out there just flat on that concrete slab. And pretty soon there's walls all over the place because they're really heavy, and I was really nervous about lifting them in place. Finally, the kids talked me into starting to lift these walls up. We brace them in place, and then we figure out all those ceiling joists we have to manually lift up there to start building the second floor. We get that floor decking up there, and then we start building the upstairs walls. Same thing happens. The girls volunteer to mark those lines. So I don't even notice that all the upstairs walls, the numbers are also off, just a little bit. In fact, we got half of those upstairs bedroom walls built before I catch 2 of my kids whisper arguing over the blueprint. Now by then, the blueprint, you saw it, it's wrinkled stained, it's been rained on. We've got it spread out on the floor. We've got a couple of chunks of concrete holding the corners down, some wood over here. And the oldest 2 kids, Hope and Drew, are arguing over this. Now, Hope is the oldest. We'll get some oldest kids in the room. Any of you like the oldest kids in your family? You guys? You are born good at everything, aren't you? I mean, I don't make the rules, but you're good at everything, and you're not quiet about that fact, are you? Now, you have whisper argued like twice in your entire life. So Hope, whisper arguing, I know I'm in trouble. So I come up behind these kids, I'm looking over their shoulder, and I don't get it. It's just our blueprint there. But as soon as the kids see me standing behind them, they scatter. And when they do, Hope's foot knocks a chunk of wood off that blueprint, kind of blows up in the wind, and I see something. I hold that blueprint up like I'm Indiana Jones or something, and I can see through this whole blueprint, there are these faint erased lines. Those are the walls that I drew. A little bit out from those are some darker lines. Those are the lines we've now used to build almost all the walls in the house. Those are lines my kids have drawn in. They have shifted half the walls in the house, upstairs and downstairs, so all the walls that need to still line up. They've taken space from my laundry room, bathroom, couple of closets, all, you probably guessed it if you had kids, all so they could add a few extra inches to their bedrooms. Who raised these kids anyhow? Hope and Drew had been arguing over this line. It had been erased a whole bunch of times, where they'd gone to war over the property line between their rooms. Hope won that argument. Oldest kids in the room were all like, I know she did. So I don't know, what do you think? Are there any downsides to teaching your team to set a big goal and then just dive in and do step one? No, I don't think they are. These are the same kids who weeks before were in the back seat of my car nibbling blueberry Pop-Tarts in survival mode. And there they are with that level of confidence. These were ordinary kids. Turns out this is what happens when you give ordinary people the tools, the strategies to get themselves unstuck, to motivate themselves to move forward. Ordinary people can do extraordinary things. We're up on the second floor here, and I'm trying to decide, am I supposed to punish these kids or high-five them? I don't know. And that's when the inspector comes speeding up the driveway, a cloud of dust, and I just yell down at him, hey, is there a problem? He says, I'm just here to inspect your roof. Problem is, I don't have a roof. We were behind on everything. The bank had been calling me for weeks saying, hey, you're about to default on this loan, Cara. Over the next few weeks, we scrambled to build the rest of the walls, windows, floors, ceilings, finally that roof. We install hardwood flooring, staircases. By the time we get down to the last couple weeks of this build, we looked and felt pretty ragged. We're out here this day in August. It's 110 degrees. The kids stayed out there with me till after midnight, and then they went home, sleep, homework, showers. We had to get up and do it all again the next day. And I stayed out there. I did this almost every night, trying to catch us up on our list. And that night, I finished all the bathroom tile. I had to get up for the office at 5 a.m. I finished at 2 a.m. I wash my tools, and then I rip a piece of cardboard from a tile box, and I walk through the house making a final punch list. Here's everything we have to finish in order to pass our inspection in 2 weeks. And I realized that night, it's not possible. It's not. Our front porch is 7.5 feet off the ground with no railing around it. Inspector can fail me without stepping in the house. We'd run into a couple of problems along the way. One of them was was with the roof, because raising the roof is always a little harder than you expect it to be. I couldn't afford to have the rafters built off-site and like a crane lift them into place, so the kids and I had to stick build all the rafters in place. And that actually went fine, but then at the front corner of the house, which block and fill foundation, 7.5 foot tall, first floor, second floor, the front of the house, when you work on the roof, you're 3 stories up. And I watched Drew, who was 16 by then, wrap his ankle around one of those rafters, lean out over 3 stories with a nail gun to nail in the roof decking. And I said, nope, we're gonna call it right here. And I hired someone to put up the roof decking and the shingles, which by the time we were here, weeks from inspection, meant I had used all the money to do things like buy countertops already. So weeks from inspection, I can't install our sinks and faucets because we don't have countertops. I haven't installed our toilets. I've got like half the lights up. I put the doors up, but I haven't even picked out things like doorknobs. The money, the energy's pretty much gone. Jada here wants to try out for the basketball team at school. Hope wants to take this job running a campaign for a politician. And Drew had started drawing right here on his left hand Egyptian slave symbols. True story. Next morning over breakfast, I hold up that little punch list and the kids won't even make eye contact. They just grunt at me. I worried my entire day at the office. There's no way I can pull these kids back out here. They're teenagers. Can't make teenagers pick up their socks if they don't want to. You're not gonna believe what the kids did that day. They showed up. It turns out that when your entire team can really see that goal, when they know the stakes and they can feel the stakes personally, they show up. It's the recipe to creating this unstoppable team. Hope showed up that day and she's dragging these coolers. They were filled with sandwich fixings and soda. Big step up from the beef jerky and hose water I'd fed everybody for 9 months. Drew shows up. He's got this brand new mix CD that we play on this paint-splattered boombox. If you don't know what a CD is, you can look that up on TikTok tonight. We're out there, sandwiches and music, and over the next couple of weeks, we did things like build this temporary porch rail out of 2x4s and spray-painted pieces of rebar. We scrambled to finish everything. We found a video about concrete countertops. I bet I could do that. Last few weeks of this build, I slept 8 hours a week on a pallet of flattened cardboard boxes in an upstairs closet. Even then, cutting corners, cutting sleep. By the time we got down to the last afternoon, we show up after work and school with the inspector coming the next morning, I still have to install 4 sinks and faucets, 3 toilets, a bunch of trim, and all those doorknobs. In order for us to make it on time, everything is going to have to go perfect. Pause right here for a little statistic. Turns out, in the entire history of house building, there have been exactly 0 days where everything went perfect. Am I right? The first thing we noticed is that because the crew that installed those concrete countertops was still in training, potty training, the holes that we'd made for the faucets to go through those countertops, they weren't big enough for faucets to go through. I had to crawl into these dark cabinets, lay down on my back, and try to chisel larger holes through almost 4 inches of solid concrete. Of course, it took hours. I'm trying not to break these. There's concrete shards all falling in my face and hair. And by the time I get the last faucet in place, Drew has figured out there's another major problem with the drain lines. Also, because of how we built the countertops, we have another big delay. Jada had watched a video about installing doorknobs, so she's going through the house installing doorknobs. She's got little Roman here following behind her, and he hands her each one of the tiny screws. Roman's also got a coin. He's flipping. That's how they decide which side of each door they're going to put the lock on. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm somewhere putting up some trim, and I hear Drew go into the last bathroom we have to work on that night. It's this little half bath under the stairs. And I hear him rip the cardboard away from the last toilet we have to install. We are this close. And then I hear him yell through the whole house, "Oh, crap!" No toilet pun intended. That's just a quote from Drew. That last toilet has a hairline crack. Top of the bowl, all the way down to the base. If we install it, it'll leak. Leaky toilets don't pass inspection. In case you're wondering, there is no such thing, at least where I live, as an all-night drive-through toilet store. The inspector will be there at 7 a.m. before any stores open. There's no way to fix this. My kids and I have pushed ourselves past our limits, and we're about to fail. Not just at a toilet or an inspection, but at this entire project. And of course, I know it would take like an hour later the next day to go buy a toilet and install it, but it would take weeks to get back on a new final inspection list. And I'd scheduled this inspection on the day of my deadline with the bank. Now, would that inspector really fail me? He told me every time he wasn't cutting me any slack. Would the bank really take my house? I wasn't about to test him. And my kids and I didn't need some kind of a half win where we're begging to pass. We needed this to feel like a victory. So I needed to get an inspector past that toilet without him flushing it. I turned to Drew and I said, "Just install the toilet." He started arguing with me. I said, "No, install the toilet. Just don't turn the water on. I have an idea." I went out to this shop that we'd built to store all our supplies while we're working, and I got the tissue holder and the towel holder for this bathroom. They didn't have to be installed to pass inspection, but I had an idea that they could save us. I run back in, and this toilet's installed. I close the seat on it, and I rip open this tissue holder, and I put the cardboard packaging on top of the seat. And then I put all the metal pieces and parts and screws on top of that. And then I rip open this towel holder, and I put it over the back of the tank so it's hanging over that flushing handle. All the metal pieces, parts, screws, and I add pliers, screwdrivers. No one's gonna wanna move all that. And then Hope and Jada carry in some extra boxes of tile and pile it up next to the toilet, hiding that hairline crack and the water line, which is turned off. Then we all go home. We have to get a couple hours of sleep and be back out there the next morning before work and school to meet that inspector. As soon as we get out there, the kids are kind of doing their own thing. Hope is studying for the SAT up in her room, and Drew's got some scrap lumber in the backyard. He's trying to build a desk. Roman's got his little tricycle flipped over. He's working on a wheel. He's got his own tool belt by then. It rides a little low on his pull-up diaper. And like 2 minutes before the inspector's supposed to get there, Jada comes running downstairs and she says, "Mommy, you forgot to nail up the baseboard in my room." Does that have to be done? I don't know. I run back up there, and sure enough, I've cut all the baseboard, but the toilet happened and it's laying there in this big messy pile. So I get down on my hands and knees and I start like propping all of this baseboard up. And I'm trying to kind of do it, so like each piece is holding up all the pieces before it. And I get all the way around to the last corner, and I just have Jada stand there. So now her feet are holding up the baseboard in the whole room. And then I start looking everywhere, like hammer, nails, paint cans. We have to have left something out that I can use to prop all of this up. And I'm still looking everywhere when the doorbell rings. Jada, honey, stay right there, don't move. And then I say something no one should ever say to a 12-year-old girl with an Instagram account. Just look natural, honey. Jada. I run downstairs and open the door for that inspector, and he just barks at me, well, how about it? Are you finished or not? I'm so relieved just to be able to answer him quickly, so I do. I say, I have absolutely no idea. Before I even close the door, he's measuring the height of the ceiling. He measures the height and width of every stair, the distance between the little baluster things, and I'm delirious with exhaustion following him. He goes through the whole upstairs, checking outlets, light switches. He passes by Jada, she's still all. By the time he circles all the way through, goes through the downstairs and steps into this little half bath with the broken toilet, I was so nervous I was talking at him at like 10,000 words a minute. I watched as he walked up to that toilet with his clipboard. He reaches out toward that flushing handle, drops his hand, he's scowling. He gets a little better angle on that toilet, lifts his hand up again, drops it, stands bolt up, and glares at me. He knows. He knows, and he's got me. I am outside of that bathroom, and I'm telling him for like the 5th or the 6th time, and I'm trying to still say this like I believe it. We're gonna put our TV right here. Our sofa's gonna go there. I was frantic. I'm standing in the middle of this house that started out of desperation. My kids and I had been alone, isolated, afraid. I hadn't even been able to keep them safe. That's how this had started. But it had become something more. And these kids had been giving up too much to build a house that might fail. I couldn't just set them up for the biggest failure of their lives. But there was a man standing in my bathroom who could take it all away with a swipe of his pen. Everything we'd gone through out here went flashing through my mind as I locked eyes with that inspector in the biggest challenge of my life. And when he lifted his hand for the 3rd and final time and then dropped it, the blood, sweat, tears, everything we'd put into this house came crashing to an end. When he signed that final inspection, and this crazy idea, this wild project, just became the place that we call home sweet home. And we passed. Inkwell Manor is a 3,500 square foot house. We built 5 bedrooms, some a little bigger than I had planned. We built 3 bathrooms, my floor-to-ceiling dream library, plus a 3-car garage, a big shop, 2-story treehouse, and of course we put that little Harry Potter cupboard under the stairs. And as I stood in the house on that final day, I knew exactly why that inspector had changed his mind and passed us. And I know you're probably thinking it's because he took one look at me and thought, I could probably take him. He saw in me what I had seen in my kids. This house had changed me. The way I walked and stood, what I believed was possible. There wasn't a cell in my body that would ever feel powerless again. And the best part was how we got there. We built an entire house because a how-to video pulled me up to make a cake, and then a counter, and then a whole house. And I will use the strategies I learned from these videos for the rest of my life. I challenge you to use them too. Make sure every single person on your team can see that finished goal, so clear they can taste it. And then get the tools in your hands. You don't have to know how to do the whole thing to start that momentum. Figure out one step. Good. Now figure out one more. And believe, ordinary people can do extraordinary things. If a single mom with no construction experience can go from being a software architect to a DIY house architect, you can do extraordinary things. You know, I don't know what you came here today hoping you'd get, but here's how I see this. This is me taking some of the tools that I learned to be more resilient, to build back after times have been a little bit tough, some of the tools that help you bounce back. This is me passing them off to you. And with all the scrappy grit and determination you've shown over the last couple of years, I can't wait to see how big you build next. Let 2023 be the year you raise the roof on the entire construction industry. And thank you for your time. Absolutely. We have time for Q&A.
Yes, we have time for a few questions that you might have, Cara. First of all, we want to thank you for an extraordinarily inspiring story, and so many of the touch points that you made there at the end, frankly, have connectivity with what we've been talking about the last few days. Creating, just getting started. There's knowing in the going. We can do extraordinary things. Together we can go farther. And so many touch points I was relating to what the job is before us to what you've done. And we commend you for your amazing accomplishment. And so we've got some time. I was waiting for the lights to go up. We've got some time for a question or two that you might have of Cara. Anybody have one they'd like to ask? Right here. Thank you.
Any of your kids going to go into construction?
Somehow I knew that any kids going into construction question was going to come up. No, my kids have a really good memory. No, my oldest son, Drew, really wants to build his own house. The kids today are 32, 30, 26, and 17. Drew is determined to build his own house. And obviously, turnabout's fair play. I'm going to have to show up.
One final question I have, Cara, is what's next after next? Beautiful library you're showing there, and you still got a lot of tread on your tires. Where is life taking you next after this journey?
Next, I just wrote my 9th book. It comes out in March. It's called Unstuck. And there are more books in me. I will be writing more nonfiction and fiction. We are working on the film and TV shows still. Hollywood's kind of messy. That's been up and down. We did write a film with Nicole Kidman. That was to start filming in 2020, so you all know what happened there. And we now have a contract for a reality TV show that may or may not happen, as well as a streaming TV series. In fact, I have a meeting with producers tomorrow for that. Those things, Hollywood, you get a lot of people together to do something. If one person falls out, you start over. So this is like I've lost 6th or 7th option to do this. So we'll keep working on it.
Keep going. You're doing great. You're inspiring everybody that you meet. Thank you again for joining us today, Cara.